So we just got back from Disneyland, and I was able to check something off of my Disney bucket list I've been wanting to do for years. Stick around, we've got all the details. Hello everybody, welcome to RTD Adventures. My name is Brian.
And I am not Jacob.
So this is Stacy, this is my wife. We just got back from Disneyland and we were able to do the Walt's Main Street Story Tour, and we just kind of wanted to share our thoughts about this experience. So just kind of as a quick overview, this is a tour that's offered in Disneyland daily. They've got a few times available every day. It's $160 per person, and they take you on a little bit of a tour of Main Street and just talk about some of the history of some of the locations there. And then you actually get to go into Walt's apartment and then spend some time on his patio. So we're going to detail some of our experiences with that here. So when the tour starts, you're going to check in about 15 minutes before the tour happens at a kiosk on Main Street. So this is up by the guest services. And what you do is you go check in and you just kind of hang out in this little private area. Actually, I've never even been back there before, so it was kind of neat to sit in that area. But they give you a lanyard that you get to actually keep, and then they give you an earpiece. So what that does is when the tour guide is walking around and talking about things, you're able to hear them really clearly, and you don't have to worry about them competing with the other noises on Main Street. So when we start the tour, we begin on Main Street over by the flagpole at the front of Main Street. So they take us over there, and our tour guide starts telling us a little bit about the opening day at Disneyland, a little bit about the opening day speech, which is kind of fun because the shirt that I was wearing was actually, it said, "To all who come to this happy place, welcome." And so our tour guide got a good kick out of that while she was talking about the opening day speech.
So along the tour, they take you down Main Street and they just give you facts about some of the people that was in Walt's life and how some of the buildings down Main Street, he incorporated them into the windows, and there's different people that helped create Disneyland, some of the creative people who inspired the parks and worked along with Walt.
Right, so a lot of the people that had a big influence in Walt's life or on the creation of Disneyland have got windows on Main Street, so they go into a little bit of the history of that, and they take you down Center Street. They just hit up a couple of those important places along Main Street, so they took us to the cinema, and they talked about the ticket attendant that's in the front there of the Main Street Cinema has a name tag, and the hometown is Marceline. And so that was a cool little detail that I didn't really ever pick up on before. Those of you that are big history buffs about Disneyland, it's probably not any information that you haven't heard before. But you know, it's a lot of little neat details if you haven't really dove deep into the history of Main Street. So we took a little bit of footage from our experience on Main Street. You know, we went over along Center Street and then the cinema, and they took us over to the Coke Corner. And along that area. But once we get actually to the coolest part of the tour, we're not allowed to film. So you can't film inside of Walt's apartment. But above the fire station on Main Street, Walt had his own private little area. And this was built as a temporary apartment for him. I guess I'd never really realized that before.
Yeah.
It was built as a temporary apartment, and
not necessarily for him to stay there, just somewhere where he could go while he was in the park.
Yeah, so his private getaway, so he wasn't always being swamped by guests. But the suite above Pirates of the Caribbean was supposed to be his full residence, and that's not something that I had heard before. I thought that was a cool little fact. But you know, they had us put our phones away, and then they took us through the gate by the fire station, and then there's a staircase behind there that they take you up, and this is actually a pretty fun experience. So our tour guide was about to open up the apartment as we're going up the staircase, and there was a little spider crawling on there.
It wasn't that little.
It was a fuzzy little jumping spider.
It was a decent-sized spider.
So she was freaked out about it, and we were all having a good time, but she called another tour guide to come help, and they were using.
I had my hand on her back so she didn't fall down the staircase.
Right. They had the long grabbers. They were trying to get the spider to fall off the door. So that was a fun little fiasco. I'm sure that she'll remember that one for as long as she's doing these tours. But you know, eventually we got into Walt's apartment, and this was really cool because I'd seen this in pictures before, but it's a little surreal when you actually go in there and you get to see it in person. Not as big as I thought it would be either, but no, it was pretty cool. A lot of the decorations kind of remind me of like my grandma's house. But it's all based off of like early 1900s decor. Okay, so Walt and Lillian especially, she loved Victorian era things, and she loved
lots of florals,
floral decorations, right? So the carpet was designed in that manner, and then the furniture had that same sort of design to it as well. So they kind of go in the room there, and they have a stand in the center, and they're talking about the different pieces around the apartment and kind of why Walt had those things in there. He loved making his own grilled cheese sandwiches, and so they had an old grilled cheese maker that was in a little kitchenette there. They had a couple pictures of Walt that were up on the wall, and they were telling us how originally when Walt was there were pictures of Walt's mother and Lillian's mother. And it was another kind of cool thing. They don't normally do it for all the tours, but our tour guide actually opened the drawer and showed us the pictures of the moms. And though we had a lot of time in there, I didn't feel rushed at all. They kind of told us some stories about Walt's experiences there and how Walt liked looking out the window and seeing all the guests there. And it's kind of a famous story about how he thought that the guests in the park was how Disneyland was supposed to be experienced, right? Disneyland wasn't really presentable without people in the park, because it was meant to bring entertainment to people and bring happiness to people. So he loved looking out through the window and seeing the guests enjoying themselves. And that was another cool thing, getting to look out the window and getting that same view that Walt himself had. That was a unique experience. Not to say that you get super emotional. I mean, maybe some people do, but it was kind of cool to be in that same position, that same spot that Walt actually stood and got to look out among the guests. So another thing that was kind of neat hearing about was the lamp, the infamous lamp that's in the window of the apartment. So I'd always heard that the lamp is left on in the window as a representation of Walt's spirit always being present in the parks, because cast members would look up to the window to see if the lights were on. And I always misunderstood this, and now I have more clarity on it. The lamp was not added there until after Walt's passing, and quite a few years after that. So the cast members would look for the lights on, but there was no lamp in the window. I guess when Walt was there was a phone. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that he kept his phone by the window there. But the lamp was added years later, and there's the lamp that's there now is actually a newer lamp. So that, I guess it's still an old lamp, but
it's a different lamp.
It's a different lamp that would have been more representative of things that Lillian liked, the sort of Victorian era decorations. Yeah. So that was a cool little detail that I hadn't heard before. I always assumed that the lamp was just always there, but yeah, that was added much later.
A lot of attention to detail. Coat racks with like hats and scarves that Walt would have worn, unless they were really his. I didn't ask. Yeah. But
I think most of the stuff that was actually Walt's is not there anymore. It's in the Walt Disney Family Museum in San Francisco, but it's decorated now with the way that Walt would have actually had it.
Yeah. They also, like you had mentioned, like it didn't feel rushed or anything, but they definitely took the time to answer questions. Pretty much anything that you had a question about. They really took their time and listened and answered to the question to the best of their ability.
So I'd say we had about a half hour of a tour on Main Street, and then we had about a half hour in the apartment itself, and the tour guide was really good about just letting us ask all the questions we wanted, and they have a cast member there that actually take your pictures, since you can't have your phone out while you're there. So that's how we got our pictures in the apartment.
You get the photo pass for the tour.
Right. You don't have to pay for the photo pass for it. It just automatically goes to your phone as part of the tour. And so after we spent a half hour in the apartment, then they take us out to the patio. And I guess this is something that's brand new. It hasn't been available to guests before. And this is another area where Walt liked to entertain guests, or his personal guests in the park. And so you can hear the Jungle Cruise from up there. You can hear all the sounds from Main Street, but then it's another half hour that you have to just hang out up there. And there wasn't any official part of the tour once you get out of the apartment. So our tour guide just hung out with us and just answered any questions we had. So they give you some refreshments. By refreshments, I mean you get a soft drink and a cookie. Right? But it's kind of a neat cookie. It's decorated. It's with the Walt's Main Street Story logo. And it's like a lemon cookie,
I think
frosted
it was
lemon
a
cookie.
lemon cookie. Yeah.
So it's a nice little snack. But it was more cool just to hang out up there and just take in the ambiance of Main Street and get to chat with our tour guide for an extended period of time. Shout out to Clariza, awesome tour guide. But yeah, she got to answer our questions about just a bunch of random things about Disneyland and about her experiences being a cast member there. And at no point of the tour did we feel rushed for any part of it. So it's a really cool experience. $160 for the entire thing. I wasn't quite sure about that. Yeah, per person, $160 per person. I think our group was like 6 or 7 people total.
Yeah.
It wasn't super crowded is the point, right? And I wasn't too sure about the price at first. Of course, nothing in Disneyland is cheap, but the experience just going into Walt's apartment by itself, it was worth the price, and all the other stuff was just bonus on top of it. That's been a bucket list item of mine for a long time. I've always wanted to go into Walt's apartment, and to be able to finally do that and get all those stories about Walt along the way. Definitely worth your time, definitely worth your money. If that's something you're considering, it's highly recommended from me. I don't know what you think about that.
I'd do it again. I would definitely do it again.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it.
I wouldn't mind paying for it and doing it a second time. So if that's something you're considering, highly recommended. Just make sure you book that far enough ahead of time so you get the day and the time that you want on your vacation. But overall, awesome experience. We appreciate you guys hanging out with us while we went over the talk about all this. But if you guys are interested in more great Disneyland videos, we're going to put a playlist up here with lots of other tips about making your perfect vacation. But until next time, thanks for watching.
And there's me.